We've all been there. Something you didn't plan for. It's your health, your spouse, your job, something that now stands in the way. As Mike Tyson reminds us, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Anyone can make a plan, but very few can execute when the pressure's on. Well, imagine having a way to handle things that get in the way, even turn the obstacle into an opportunity. Welcome to A Call to Rise. I'm your host, Joel Landy, founder, entrepreneur, former naval officer, and this is where we help you build resilience, which is the ability to manage high levels of challenge and disruption while maintaining high levels of effectiveness and well-being. Because goals without setbacks are uncommon and big plans without resilience are just not happening. So if your job or life demands staying and playing at a high level, you're exactly where you need to be. So let's jump in. Today's podcast is about value, specifically the value you bring, and really how you can deliver massive value. We're going to unpack that today. Now, if I were to ask you the question, how do you bring value? How would you answer that? A lot of us struggle with that, but that's what today's about. Today's podcast is to push past that. And it's designed to help you by helping you identify the value that you bring and how specifically it gets delivered in three key areas. We're going to talk about your work, key relationships, and community. So many people will go to the grave with regrets for a lot of reasons, but some of them because they just didn't do with their lives what they felt was best. And it's not saying that their lives weren't productive and they weren't successful, but it just wasn't deep down satisfying. And of course, if the question is why, one idea is that they never really did the work, right? They never really figured out what they were designed to do. So they did what they had to do. And I think this relates to a very common conversation that I have with men who tell me that they feel like they're not living up to even their own expectations. And it's not because they're weak and they're not lazy, but because, their efforts feel misaligned. And that's an important word for today. They're not clear on the value they bring to their work, to the relationships, and certainly to their communities, right? So I want to unpack that today. But first, I want to differentiate something, right? Gifts are innate, right? A gift is natural. It's a natural talent. It's a passion that you're born with. Maybe it's a knack for music, a natural empathy, so on and so forth. Whereas strengths are developed. It's a developed ability. It's honed through repetition and investment of time and practice and skill. Public speaking could be one, advanced coding, but gifts are often effortless, while strengths represent consistent, near-perfect performance in tasks. So there's the differentiation. Many view gifts, which is a natural thing, sometimes even spiritual, as a tools to be used in service to others, to bring value to others, whereas strengths are often applied for high performance at work, so on and so forth. But it's critical to remember that a gift can only become a strength and bring value when it's focused. That's a key takeaway of today's conversation. So here are three examples, right? Example number one is the empathetic leader, right? A gift might be a natural care for others or be empathetic, while a strength is using that empathy to be effective in leading or mentoring somebody else. So that's just a first example. The second one is the pattern spotter, and we see this with engineers. A gift might be a natural ability for this person to see order in complexity. They notice connections, they notice inconsistencies, they see structure that others walk right past, but the strength is using that pattern recognition to diagnose problems quickly, to build better systems and solutions, and to give others a clear map through confusion, right? So the gift is what you notice, but the strength is how you apply it to build with it, right? That's example two. Example three is the room reader. A gift might be an instinctive awareness of the energy in a room, who's checked out, who's doing well, where the tension is sitting, so on and so forth, what's not being said, right? But the strength is using that social attunement, right? That awareness to diffuse conflict before it escalates, to create environments where people feel safe, to contribute, to have meaningful conversations, or know exactly when and where, how to deliver a difficult message to people or even a small group. The gift is the antenna. The strength is how skillfully you act on the signal. So here are three ideas, right? Three key ideas we can explore. Number one is you identifying your gift. Two is gauging how often you get to use it. Because remember, if you focus it, it becomes a strength. And then third, to close the gap with one simple move. So the first one is identifying your gift, right? So here are 5 clues to help you identify natural gifts. Number one, rapid learning, right? So this is just the idea that you pick up things very quickly. This is a natural inclination to learn something. And you know this because it's just something that's very obvious to you, right? The second thing is just glimpses of excellence. If you look in your rearview mirror and you think, wow, I had a couple of these 2-3 experiences, maybe they're high school, college, or even younger, where you just did something extraordinary. Maybe that award still hangs on your wall, but it really is extraordinary. The third thing is just this idea of flow, right? Which is what we all fight for. This idea that you're completely immersed in something. It brings a tremendous amount of joy, and you completely lose awareness of time, right? The fourth one is just a yearning, right? There's something that you keep rehearsing in your mind. You have an attraction to something, and you keep rehearsing it, and you long for it, and you want it, but you never quite get to it, but you keep romanticizing that idea. Number 5 is just the satisfaction, the feeling that you get energized by the actual thing that you do, right? So those are 5 ways that you can actually just take an evaluation of yourself and think about it, right? Now, the second idea is to gauge how often you use it, right? This is what we want to talk about, is to get an idea of how often do you use this particular gift and talent, right? And so this is important because, again, unless you're focusing the gift, it's not going to turn into a strength and it's not going to bring value to other people. So it's got to be focused, and that's where it becomes the strength, right? You can have a natural gift, but it needs to be unearthed and needs to be deployed, right? But that's the idea and the key where you actually can deliver massive values, or massive value to other people, right? And so one way to gauge this is to spot where things align and where they misalign, right? So stay with me here. I think you'll understand this as an example. But right now I want to talk about, this is getting an idea of how often you actually do the very thing you're designed to do, right? So you have to think about how often you come alive and how often you feel like you're sluggish and you feel maybe like you're struggling, right? So the first one is, if you're doing this thing and you're aligned, your energy feels replenished after you do the work. Now that's counterintuitive, right? Because after you do work, usually people feel wiped out and they need to go home and recuperate, but this is work that makes you come alive. Whereas if you're not aligned with your gift or you're misaligned, you consistently feel exhausted from doing work. Especially hard work. And that's not to be confused with hard like physical work, but you just, work wipes you out. Chances are you're not in your gift set, right? You're not in your strength. Another way to feel aligned is others are seeking you out consistently for this particular thing that you bring. Like you have now a reputation, they know that you do it well, and people are like, hey, would you mind helping me do this because we know that you really light it up in this area. That's you probably living from your gift and your strength, right? Obviously, the opposite of it is you're doing what you can do, but no one's really seeking you out to do it, right? So you're kind of remaining under the radar, and that's just sometimes an idea that you're not really being recognized for using a gift. The other thing is, you're aligned when your results come with less effort than expected, which is kind of cool, right? You're doing something, you're like, wow, that kind of didn't even feel that hard, yet it brought results. And then the opposite is true, right? We have high effort, you have kind of somewhat mediocre output, and it just never feels that rewarding to you. So this is the kind of work where you're doing it, and maybe even other people are, commending you for it, but you internally just don't feel like it's really that great. You're like, okay, well, it is what it is. Okay, so another way of feeling aligned is that you lose track of time. I mentioned this earlier when you're doing it. That's one of the key really signs that you really are working in your gift and in your talent. The opposite, you're watching the clock. Sometimes I can be doing things and I'm literally counting backwards down to completing it. And then wow, okay, this is just something that you want to get through and get off your radar. Probably not working in your gift, probably not the way that you're going to bring the most value to the world, right? Another idea is just, when you do something that you're in your gift set, you feel proud about it, right? You show it off, not in an arrogant way, but when you show it to other people, you feel like this is a contribution that I make to the world and it really energizes me. When you're not aligned with your gift and talent, you almost feel, embarrassed is a strong word, but you feel kind of vaguely hollow when people look at this particular thing and you're like, well, okay, I guess it's doing something for someone, but you don't really feel just inwardly jazzed up, right? So again, one of the biggest takeaways I want you to have from the podcast is that a gift can only become a strength and bring value, and even massive value, when it's focused and it's intentionally used, right? And that's why we're going through this exercise, this conversation, for you to kind of take a look in your rearview mirror and to figure out, okay, how do I know I'm doing it right? So we talked about how to actually locate it, how often it's used. Third is, let's close the gap in one easy move between, let's say you do know what your gift is, but you're just not using it, right? So we want to talk about this idea of realigning what you really sets you on fire and brings a lot of value to others, right? And it's not a dramatic shift in life, right? It usually starts with a small, deliberate step. First, it's self-awareness, but it's a small, deliberate step toward doing more of that thing, the thing that really ignites you. And it's going to feel a little awkward. Maybe it's not tied into your compensation, but it's just something that hey, this is something that really makes me come alive. And on the opposite side of that, it's just starting to remove the obstacles that consistently pull you away from it. Right. So this is something now that you're aware of, and now it's something that you have got to experiment using your time to start to cultivate and disallow things to get in your way. But in order to bring real value to today's podcast, I want to give you a gift. All right, and this is the first time I realized this is the third podcast, but I want to give you a gift, and this is an exercise I do with my clients. There's going to be an attachment somewhere. I don't know where this is going to be found, but you'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. But it's called D.E.S.I.G.N, which is an acronym, right? D.E.S.I.G.N is an acronym. So let me quickly break down the D.E.S.I.G.N acronym for you and ask you just a handful of questions. And this is going to be in the exercise. So, if you're losing if it goes quick or you're not connecting with it, you'll get it in the exercise. I need to reach over here and grab my MacBook. Okay, so let me walk you through this, right? So D is drives, E is experiences, S is spiritual gifts, I is impact, G is genius, and N is nature. So drives, right? So let's talk about what gets your heart beating fast. These are just things that really naturally excite you. We all have these things. Sometimes we don't like to admit them. Sometimes we get scared when we think of them because they're important to us, right? What makes you cry? What breaks your heart? I ask people, that often about what makes you indignant about something that's happening in the world, something that bothers you. There's a clue that can be connected to a gift or a talent that has been put inside of you to be a solution to that. We talk a little bit about it, but what is your passion? And as I mentioned earlier, what is a burden, right? What burden do you carry? And is there something from your past that sometimes that you're unresolved about? Interestingly enough, some of the things that we struggle with and overcome are things that we were actually intended to overcome so that we can make a contribution to the world. And that's a very interesting topic. So that's drives, right? D. E is experiences. What are some unique experiences that have happened in your life? What have been what you might call some defining moments? Who are your heroes? There's a reason why they're your heroes, right? What have been your high points and your low points? And have you ever experienced a dark night of the soul? And I mentioned that up in the D section, right? A lot of us, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of us have had things happen in life that we've called into question, why are we here? Why is it this dark? Why is it this painful? Why is it this difficult? And a lot of us have got to confront that moment. And when we do, there's usually, if we're fortunate, there's a phenomenally rich lesson into why we actually had that experience. So that's the E, right? S is spiritual gifts. Now, I want to just mention this to all of you. Some of you listening to this podcast, you might not identify as religious or even or spiritual. And there's a distinction between being religious and being spiritual. And I think, religious people can tend to be, conform to a lot of tradition and get the check in the box and do what they think is expected of them and go to church and so on and so forth. And, maybe spiritual people are more inclined to think about a relationship with God and wanting to be transformed and have a capacity to love others and be a light in the world and, do good in the world. But that's not the focus of the conversation today. Is not for me to define those things for you. But here's what I do want to ask or say is, if you've never thought about a spiritual gift, I just want to ask you to consider that, just to consider what a spiritual gift might be. And you might be listening to this going, dude, I'm not spiritual. And that's okay. That's okay. But I want you to open your mind up to the idea that you have a spiritual gift. And of course, that can only be received by faith. And that's just something that's completely up to you, right? Completely up to you. So that's the spiritual gift. And you might not have one. Or if you do, obviously the question is, are you using it? And if you don't, Have you ever really done the deep dive to determine what specifically it is? So that's the S for design, right? The I is impact. What arena do you feel most compelled to impact? Some people would love to get into politics. Many can't. Some people have always wanted to make their mark in business. A lot of people have wanted to go into the ministry and actually help people in a traditional Christian background. But, where have you been or feel called that when you get the flicker, what direction does the flicker move you? Where would you like to help and who, right? And that leads to the second part of the impact question. Are you inclined to work with children, teens, singles, couples, marrieds, young men, middle-aged men, retired men, people, I just met somebody at an event in Santa Barbara who wants to coach people that have been newly divorced. I think that's a great thing to do in life, to help people that are just, that have gotten ripped apart and are really hurting and need a way forward. Right. So where do you want to make an impact? That's I, right? The G in design is genius. And this is a recurring theme on the podcast. But what do natural gifts, we talked about that. And hopefully now because of this podcast, they're going to be made more obvious to you. The idea of doing things effortlessly, we covered that. We talked about things that you do extremely well. And this is just a thought too in your genius. Do you prefer to work with people? Do you prefer to work with things? Which is an interesting distinction, right? Because you can actually be a people person and be driven to want to be around other people and make a difference within a team or in an organization with people. Or you might feel that your genius, going back to the illustration with an engineer, is seeing complexity in very, very difficult ways, and then creating solutions that other people just can't see, right? So that's the G. What is your genius? And then N is your nature, right? And some of us have done personality assessments. Are you extroverted or introverted? You can be both. Are you sensing or intuitive? Are you thinking or feeling? Are you structured or spontaneous? Are you people oriented? Are you task oriented? So these are just great clues that when we take the time to put color on the canvas, it gives our life more texture and more dimensions. So if we think about those things, right? The drives, the experiences, potentially the spiritual gifts, the impact, the places that we want to make a mark, our genius, which is what the podcast is about, and then really knowing our nature. When we put those 5 things together, it creates a compelling canvas for you to think about, wow, this is how I can actually make a tremendous impact and bring tremendous value to the world if I take these 5 ideas and I crystallize them and point them in one direction. So that's the exercise that you're going to be getting. Take this particular exercise and share the results with 2 people. Have a conversation with 2 people, right? Because it's going to open up a lot of doors, and it's going to open up a lot of light bulbs for you, right? So again, I want you to think about this, because I know a lot's coming at you very quickly. To move through life without discovering your gifts is really to leave a part of your purpose unclaimed. And I want that to sit on the lens of your mind. Not only is a part of you unclaimed, but there's a piece of the world that remains untouched when you do not use this particular gift. I want you to think about that. The cost isn't just personal regret, but it's the loss of never knowing how rich your life could have been because you weren't practicing this one thing that you were uniquely designed to do. And so I want you to let that sit. But more importantly, I want you to take the exercise, and I want you to do it because it's something that's going to really reward you. And the key is, once you've done the design exercise, is to actually share it. Set up 2 conversations with people that really mean something to you, right? So I want you to think about that. I want you, set up these 2 conversations with 2 people that you trust, that know who you are, and make use of your time and see where the conversation goes. But, as we land the airplane today, and I want to hear about some comments, and I want to hear what you agree with and don't agree with about this, because there's a lot that's said about passion and purpose and those types of things. But discovering how you are wired and uniquely gifted to make a contribution to the world is super critical. And the reward to getting this right is a ton of impact and a ton of joy. And there's also a cost for you and I not discovering this. So great being together. Episode 3. do the exercise, drop a comment, reach out to me. Love to know your thoughts on this, and we will see you for episode 4. If today's conversation challenged you, it's a real signal you need to do the work. It's no longer an option for you, so don't push that feeling away. It's reminding you of the cost of playing small. Success is easy when things go well, but resilience, that's cultivated when things go sideways. Make sure you subscribe, and if this episode brought you value, pass it on. It's how we grow the tribe. We'll be back, hopefully next week. Until then, I'll see you next time. Here is your call to rise. Rise up so that others can rise.